first of all, I'm thankful to have you here. I appreciate you coming and being so enthusiastic about it. I know Dolly was really excited to tell me. She's like, you got to meet my friend Marjorie. So you must have good friends.
Oh, we've known each
you.
other since we were in 5th grade in grammar school.
Oh, isn't that something?
That's why she knows all this stuff.
Oh, that's fun. Best friend for life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing to have. So if you don't mind telling us like when you were born and what kind of life you were born into and where.
Okay. I was born March 21st, 1941 in Linwood, Pennsylvania, which is right on the Delaware border. And my mom and dad, my dad really was a very smart man. He was raised in Marcus Hook, which is down by the river there. And he started out as a cake boy in the rayon production. And he worked his way up on his own from that to being one of the head engineers of the American Viscose Corporation. And he designed 2 factories for the company, worked there all his life.
Oh, wow.
My mother was a very smart lady. She was a lady that stayed at home all the time. But we had this huge dictionary, and every day, Mom, Dad, and I had to learn a new word.
Oh, neat.
The meaning of it, how to use it, how to spell it, and the dinner table, we had to work it into the conversation.
Oh, isn't that neat? And were your parents were they born in America or were they immigrants?
No, they were born in America.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad actually, his family, his last name was Alexander, but I've learned since that his ancestors really were Russian.
Okay.
And they became servants because they had servants, and they worked their way over to Wales. And from there, they came to Pennsylvania and owned coal mining.
Okay.
And then they moved to Marcus Hook, Pennsylvania, and my grandfather died. So my dad was the oldest boy, and he had to go to work.
Yeah. That was pretty common back then, I think, for
yes, it was.
the men to take on the family because a lot of them
But
lost.
they never made it like I was anything more than just a kid.
Yeah.
And so I never really realized that he was that smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He took good care of you.
Yes,
sounds like.
very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so growing up in Pennsylvania back in the 40s and 50s, what was it like after World War II to grow up over there?
Well, of course, they went through World War II. And my dad worked for the same company all his life. But he and my mom really raised me with the idea that I was not special.
Yeah.
And so I worked my way through college. I took various jobs wherever I could get them. And I did. I was almost 18, and my cousin owned a trucking company from Pavo, Georgia. And he came up with a load of vegetables and fruit, parked in front of my mother and dad's home, and then decided we would go around the corner to my aunt's home, and he put me in the driver's seat. I had never worked air brakes, and I went around and I pushed on the air brakes, almost jackknifed the truck. And he laughed and said, "You won't do that again." Yeah. And then he put me in the truck, and I drove from Pavo, Georgia to Commission Row in New York City on weekends and when I had time off.
From school.
And then I would deadhead over from Commission Row to York, Pennsylvania, where his mother owned warehouses.
Yeah.
And he'd buy up, estate sales and things like that, and I'd take them back down to Pavo.
Yeah.
And then pick up another load.
And where were you going to school at this time?
Temple University.
Okay.
Well, I was going to high school at Chichester High School, and then I went to Temple University.
And what were you going to school for?
I ended up with my doctorate in immunohematology, which is glorified blood banking.
Yeah.
And I also took a master's in psych because I worked with a youth group. And we had a lot of drugs coming in because you had a lot of petroleum industry, and they were bringing in all these oil, truck boats and things.
The tankers.
And the kids in the schools were afraid that their friends were going to be hooked on drugs. So I went to get my master's in psych. Didn't work much. And I went out to visit my cousin in Oklahoma. And Tulsa was where they were. And at that time, Dave Wilkerson was visiting, and he was putting on a bunch of programs. And I met him through them. And he stopped on his way back to New York, and he came down from Philadelphia, and he introduced me to Bob Bartlett, who was the director of the group in Philadelphia, a teen challenge. And I worked with them until I learned how to work with them. And then I started working with them in the church where I was in Linwood.
Yeah. So you had a drive to work really hard. And did you work as a child, like growing up?
Oh, yeah. I worked on my uncle's farm down in Delaware.
You told me you worked at one time at a young age with snakes or reptiles.
Oh, yes. My mother and dad and my aunt and uncle had a stand at the Kenton-Sussex County Fair. It's now the Delaware State Fair. And I was too young to work behind the counter. So my job was to go out and collect up all of the empty soda bottles. Well, I made friends with all of the people they called them carnies, worked in the carnivals. One of them happened to be the guy that had the snake show. And he had both venomous and non-venomous snakes. So he would extract the venom. They call it milking the snakes for the venom before he would do a show. And he taught me how to do it because he sold the venom to make anti-venom. Mm-hmm. And then if he got bitten by one of those snakes, it would be called what they dry bite.
Right.
And it wouldn't give him any trouble. But I learned to do it. And later on, I got a job extracting venom from snakes.
Yeah. And that's probably something you never thought you would do.
Well, no. I must have been the only person applied for the job because I got it.
That's fun. So, I just wanted to bring that up because I know you had told me about that previously. I think that's not a lot of people can say they've extracted venom from poisonous snakes.
And when I worked at the zoo as the curator of education, Chris Honecker was the keeper that kept the venomous snakes, and I worked with him in the venomous snake exhibits. Uh-huh. And I also worked with non-venomous snakes, and we had, at that time, Montgomery Zoo had one of the largest retic pythons in captivity, and I was the only person that took her out on presentations. I didn't do it very often because she was so big, and I had to have a lot of help carrying her.
Yeah.
But we had a boa constrictor that I refused to say I named because it was named Boa Derek. And explaining that to a bunch of fourth graders who hadn't heard of her at all was real interesting. But we have, I have a picture. I think they put a picture of me working with her. Yeah,
we'll definitely get those pictures up on here so people can see everything you've done, which is just incredible.
I've done so many things.
So going back, I got a question about the is it hematology? Or what is it?
Immunohematology. I worked all of the different labs in the hospital, but I specialized in immunohematology, which is glorified blood banking.
Okay.
I did that because I started out in chemistry, and they started bringing in machines, and I decided I didn't like that, so I went into blood banking.
Okay. When you were working with blood, was there ever anything when you were going through the process of learning about it where you had these like not epiphanies, but where you just realized how amazing blood really is? Or was there, because it really is incredible what everything it does to the human body. Yeah. Was there anything like that you were kind of surprised by or that sticks out?
Well, you're always surprised what you find in blood. but there's all kinds of things that you find. And I had some patients that had received so many blood transfusions and they build up what they call antibodies that you couldn't really cross-match them. It would be hard to find blood for them. And there were 2 patients that I recall that the doctors pretty much had given up on because they had received so much blood. And they would ask me just to figure out what tests that I needed.
Yeah.
And I kept 2 of them going for quite a long time.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, my not to get off topic, but I think you'll appreciate this. And it really was an incredible thing for me is my biological father passed away of leukemia.
Oh,
Leukemia. He had HIV.
Ooh.
And I think he ended up with leukemia. And it was amazing because they wanted me to see him. I was his dying wish. And it was amazing to me that they could give him a blood transfusion and then blood pressure medication and to control him and, kept him alive for me to travel to see him and spend his final moments with him, which was, to me, it was just like, well, this is incredible. I don't know if I'd ever really thought of it, because I'd never had it touch so close to home, but it's just amazing what they can do. Thanks to probably people like you being in the field and, working with blood. And I'm sure it takes a special person to understand what's.
Well, I took a lot of night calls in the hospital and I worked all of the different labs because you have to.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to be able to do that. But at the same time, I really, really appreciated how much the labs have improved with the medicine and all of the equipment that they have nowadays.
Yeah. Was there any breakthroughs that you remember while you were working in the labs that really helped people or helped society?
When I started out, we didn't have what they call vacutainers. We had to put everything in little jars. Now they have tubes and they've got vacuum for taking the blood out and everything else.
Yeah.
We didn't have that when I started out.
Yeah. You guys were roughing it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. And so going from working in the chemistry, and you said you got out of that because it was starting to get more automated.
They were getting more automation. You put the blood in and it goes through the machine and it does all the tests. You get a readout. When I was working in it, we had to spin the blood down, take the plasma off, or the serum off, and perform the tests on it in chemistry individually. We had to make our own reagents up and things, and now they don't do that. They just put it in a machine and it goes through automatically.
Oh, isn't that something? And then, so after you left the medical field or with blood banking, what did you do after that?
Well, I worked in blood bank and I taught blood banking for a number of years. And then I went to work, I went in different hospitals. And the one that I worked in Northern Virginia, the tooth pathologists there were the county medical examiners. And so they had me working with them, and that's in forensics. So I had to go with them on site. Now they have people that go in there and collect the specimens and things, but back then they didn't have that, and we had to go on site. Now, because we covered Virginia, Maryland, and D.C., we crossed state lines, so you have to be federally certified. And I went to the Hoover building.
Yeah, the FBI building.
That's the FBI lab. That wasn't enough. They sent me to Quantico.
In Washington, D.C., right? Yes.
And then they sent me down to Quantico. So I had to go through that training. And that's where they issued me weapons to carry. And I got into trouble all the time because I lock them up in the evidence locker.
Yeah. And what did they give you for weapons?
Oh, I had a 45. Both of them were Smith & Wesson. I had a 45 semi-automatic and a 38 snub nose that I wore on my ankle as a secondary. And they're heavy. And do you want me to tell you what I was?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I used a shoulder holster. If you use a hip holster, you got to get it out and take the safety off. If you're doing a shoulder holster, you can take the safety off as you're holding it, and you can point it, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to know with self-defense, definitely this day and age.
You shouldn't be carrying weapons anyway.
Yeah.
I was always in trouble because I'd lock them up in the evidence locker, and when you go into court, you can't take your weapon with you.
Yeah.
And they'd fuss at me because I didn't have them. They were locked up in the evidence locker.
Yeah. So when you were working with the medical examiner, did you like that job, or was there something that stands out to you about that?
It was fine, and I really enjoyed the two men I worked with. Jim Beyer was more of a frustrated professor. He was a pathologist. And when he was doing a post, he would teach. Bill Enos had been a real MASH doctor, and he had a good sense of humor. But in any case, I learned an awful lot because I used to have to attend the posts. That's the autopsies. And because I was collecting evidence from them. And I learned an awful lot from both of those men. It was okay if you maintained a clinical attitude, but when there were children involved, it was very difficult. And I was glad to get out of the field.
Yeah, I can imagine. We just recently had a sheriff on here he was 79. He'd been in law enforcement for 54 years, and he was a detective for a while. And he talked about how hard that was the hardest part was dealing with cases involving children.
It is. It's very difficult. When you go on scene, and they didn't have people to go out and collect evidence at that time, we had to go.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult to go on scene and see what happens because you're the first ones there to go in on the scene because you can't, they can't disturb anything.
Right.
And we would be not dressed in regular clothing. I don't think I have a picture of me there because you would do all, in all of this outfits so that you don't leave any of your own DNA or own evidence anywhere. So you have to. Was
it like a hazmat suit type thing, or?
They're more of a kind of thing that you wear in the OR, but extremely because you have booties and you have headgear and you've got gloves and you've got, everything.
Yeah.
And when you collect anything, you have to take a pair of gloves off and put it in the bag, the evidence, and then you seal that bag and then you another bag and you put more gloves on. So it's quite a process.
Yeah, I can imagine. Imagine it could be rewarding at times if your justice was served or if you were ever to help get to that point, because I couldn't imagine that's an easy job at all.
Well, I can regale you with all kinds of stories.
Oh, that's okay.
Do that.
Oh, it's okay. Is there one that stands out to you that you appreciated that you worked on, or case or anything like that?
There was one gentleman that was being paternity testing, and I had developed an idea of how to collect the specimens. I had one of the orderlies have a screen in front of the gentleman, and he would collect the specimen, and we would put tape across the jars with our names on them so that, they couldn't be disturbed. And when I got to court, they thought I was making, evidence against this man because of his race. And when I looked down and I said to him, "Sir, I have not even seen this gentleman before today."
Oh, yeah.
Because he was behind a screen.
Right.
And the orderly was the one that would collect the specimen and go back and have him sign a tape.
Yeah.
And everything. So I never saw him. I just did the tests.
Yeah.
And after that, they never questioned me.
You're justified and all your answers are truthful.
Yeah.
Good for you.
That one stood out.
Yeah, I bet. I could see why. It's hard to be accused of things you're not guilty of, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And so when you left that career, what did you go to something a little bit more, what would I say?
Much more
light?
fun.
Yeah.
I volunteered. Well, my husband was with Defense Intelligence Agency, and he was down in Maxwell Air Force Base. There were some stories about that because I went through the Air War College as well. And but I volunteered in the zoo, and I became the curator of education. And that was the best job I ever had in my life, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
I'd still be working with animals if there was one close here.
Yeah. And how did that come about, becoming the curator? Did you apply for that job directly, or did you start at the zoo?
No, they did a presentation at the with the ladies at the zoo or at the Air War College, and I became a volunteer. They had the animals there, and I signed up to be a volunteer. And then because of one of my undergrad degrees was in biology, I became the curator of education.
Oh, neat. And what was your first assignment there?
Working with eagles. The first bird of prey I worked with was Ulysses. He was a bald eagle who had been injured and had one wing. One wing had been amputated. And he would flip that wing around
Yeah.
like crazy because we had put him on jesses and we put him on a leash and on. Boy, I'll tell you, he whipped me around, but I finally got him to the point where he would sit on my arm like a real gentleman.
Yeah.
And he would sit there when I was walking out into the zoo like a perfect little gentleman. Coming back to his night quarters, he would flip off at what we call it baiting. He would take his talons and he would his feet, he would double them up so I couldn't hold him on my arm. And he would flip that wing out and look over at me like I'm flying.
Yeah. Yeah. Aww.
And then I'd have to turn around and walk out into the zoo again. But I worked with all kinds of animals there.
Yeah. Well,
All kinds of animals.
like what? Like what?
Well, we had a retic python at that time. It was about 23 foot long. I think she was probably the longest one in captivity
Yeah,
at
that's
that time.
incredible.
Yeah, I would not take her out very often. It took about 4 of us to hold her up, when I would bag her because you can't let their sag. They would break their back. And I would wrap her around me, and her tail would be way down here, and I'd hold her head in my hand and make sure that she was fed real good the day before.
Yeah. What do you feed her?
Well,
Are we allowed to say?
oh, yeah. Frozen rabbits,
Oh, yeah.
chickens, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Rats.
Oh, it's wild.
But her name happened to be Cuddles,
Yeah.
by the way. And then we in the education department, we had a boa constrictor, and like I said, her name was Boa Derrick.
Yeah.
I did not name her, but we had a lot of different animals in the education department that we would take out. We had eagles, hawks, owls. I hand raised 2 golden eagles, and nobody told me that you don't usually fly a female golden eagle, a mature one, to the arm because they're very, very big. They have about an 8-foot wingspan, and they're heavy. But I flew them, and up at the Raptor Rehabilitation Center at Auburn University, I was part of that group. Joe Shelnut was the one there at that time, and if he couldn't fly, the mascot that they had was a golden eagle. At the football games, I flew her.
Oh, isn't that neat? They're a beautiful animal.
They are.
We'll be out hunting in the canyons, and we'll be up at the top, and sometimes we'll see those golden eagles or bald eagles. But there's a golden eagle distinctly that I remember flying below us, and oh my gosh, they're especially if the sun's hitting them just right. They are gorgeous.
They're wonderful birds, and I hand raised 2. I have 2 of them, Aspen and Ozark.
Yeah.
Ozark was the male, and he got so attached to me that if he heard my voice, he'd start crying.
Oh, isn't that something?
Yeah.
It's incredible how animals bond with humans.
Yeah.
I still think about that. Sometimes the dog will be bothering me, and I'm just like, this is crazy that these animals just absolutely bond with humans.
Yeah, they do. And when I would go in to the zoo, all of the animals, we take them out on presentations, and they got to know who you are.
Yeah.
We had a bison in the zoo, and it was very young when it came, and I would go in and take what they call the winter shed, the very soft fur, off of Buster to use on presentations.
Yeah.
And as he got older, he would recognize me, and most of the keepers would not go in with him without a big shield because their heads are huge and they've got these great big horns. But he would follow me around, and I think it helped that I carried carrots and apples.
Yeah. You knew how to keep him happy.
Oh, yeah. But he would follow me up into the gate, and I'd give him the apple, and then he would be happy.
Oh, that's something. Did you have a favorite animal that you worked with?
Well, I probably shouldn't even talk about it because you're not supposed to do this. But we had a tiger, a white tiger.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to be friends with the white tigers. Tigers happen to like water. And I would go in the night quarters after hours, and I would sit down on a low thing, and he would come and put his head on my lap. Now, that was after he had been in the pool.
Yeah.
And I would be wet
Just
from my
drenched.
neck to my knees.
Yeah.
And I would sit there with him all the time.
Oh, isn't that something?
He was one of my specials.
I didn't know until recently that, what do they call them? The great cats, right? They call them the great cats, and that's a cat that can roar, right? But they can't purr. Is that true?
Well, they purr, but it's only when they exhale. When you think of a regular domestic cat, they purr when they're inhaling and exhaling.
Okay.
So when a tiger purrs, it sounds like they're roaring because they're only purring when they're exhaling.
Oh, okay. That's a lot of weight to move air around. What are they? How big was this tiger? Because they get up to like 500 pounds, don't they?
Yeah, he couldn't fit anything more than his head on my lap. I mean,
wow, that's something.
It was too big.
Yeah. And did you work with marine animals as well?
The only time I worked with marine mammals was when I lived in Crescent City, and I was part of the rescue group there. And I became surrogate mama to a stellar sea lion that somebody had brought down from the north. And I became the surrogate mama to her. And she got to be huge, so huge that she wouldn't let the other animals into the pools. Yeah. And so, she was really big. But we used to rescue seals, sea lions, and otters. Yeah. There.
Were these were like animals that were found and then rescued or injured, or?
Most of them were animals that would beach themselves because they were injured. And that's why my phone number is not from up here. It's down there because you'd have to call base for transport because they're too big to carry.
Oh, wow. Do you know, have you always loved animals?
Oh, always. I worked on my uncle's farm when I was really little. Yeah. And so I've always worked with animals.
Yeah, that's neat. I think that they're so incredible, the way we interact with them these days. Yeah. Just like we were just down in Miami, we went to Jungle Island, and we did the ropes course over the wallabies and what are the giant rodents?
The capybaras?
Yeah, capybaras. Oh, and they're hilarious animals to watch.
Yeah, I hand-raised a kangaroo, a giant red kangaroo, and he got to be very large, and I would have him in the car with me, and I'd have to put the seat way back, and his feet would be sticking out. I'd put the seatbelt on him, and his head would be sticking out the sunroof.
Oh, that's funny.
Everybody around town knew me. And Charlie knew me, and when I put him back into what they call the mob at the zoo, he would hear my voice, and he'd come running over, and he had absolutely insisted on a hug. And he was much taller than I was, of course, and he'd put his head down on my head, and he put his arms around me, and they don't smell very good.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
But he got to be very, very big.
Yeah. And how come he ended up here in the United States? Was he part of the zoo, or?
He was part of the zoo.
Yeah.
And I don't know where they got him from, but he was just a little baby when I started raising him. I used to have him on me in a towel. Like, he would be like in a pocket.
Yeah, like he's in the pouch.
Yeah. And I had one of the ladies that I knew was from Australia, and she got me in touch with people because you have to feed them, and you have to feed them a special formula, and you even have to have a special bottle with a special nipple on it
Oh.
because it's a long one.
Oh, yeah, because the way they feed inside the pouch.
Inside the pouch. Yeah.
Okay.
And I used to have to sleep with one arm up
Oh, yeah.
because that's the way the mama sleeps.
Oh,
And cuddle.
isn't that something? And then how long were you at the zoo for?
Oh, gosh, I was there for years.
Yeah.
Really, I became it was funny because some of the people that were there keep in touch with me.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I'm always amazed. When I was very much younger, I was I don't know what you would call me, a leader of a youth group at the church where I was. And believe it or not, those kids have gotten in touch with me.
Oh, isn't that something?
And I'm just amazed that they keep in touch.
Yeah, it probably shows your character.
Oh, wow.
Some people just get attached to people, good people. That really shows something. For somebody that would want to get into, zoology, I guess they call it, would you have any recommendations for people that might be interested in getting involved with animals?
I would say if there's a zoo close to you, go and see if you can volunteer. And you can learn an awful lot from being a volunteer in a zoo.
Yeah.
And then if you like it enough, you can go back at school and get a degree in biology.
Yeah.
And go from there.
Yeah, I think we like to ask those things because we hope our audience is gathering, the idea is to gather some information and learn about how people got to the paths that they were doing, or if they see something that they'd like to do. And so after the zoo, did you retire from the zoo?
Well, we moved several times because of my husband's job. And I lived in all over the place because he would be going to school in different places. And if there was a zoo or if there was a place there, I would volunteer. But I also, my parents used to camp. And I've learned to fish at Cape May, New Jersey. I would go out with my dad on the head boats from the time I was really little.
Yeah.
And then we camped at a place called Indian River Inlet. It's not the inlet down in Florida. It's the one behind Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. And through the years, I bought boats. And if you want to count the canoe, you have 4 different boats.
Yeah.
And in the last boat I had was a fairly good-sized boat, and we camped in the campground across from the Coast Guard station, and they insisted, because I was taking people out through the inlet, which is very dangerous inlet, by the way. I take their course, and so I did that, but. I had some really great fishing buddies. I really did. Frank Perdue, the original guy from the Chickens.
Yeah.
He was one of them. George Sparrow was about 99 years old. I don't know what I would have done if one of those guys had ever had a heart attack out there.
Yeah.
Because I was, very young.
Yeah.
And we would go out through the inlet and catch. We called them weekies. They're sea trout. And then in the fall, the kings would school up and we'd see those and we'd get those. But it was interesting. It really was.
Yeah.
But doing all of that really helped because when my husband was at the Naval Post Grad School, I crewed on some of the whale watches and the fishing boats to pay for my pilot's license.
Yeah.
And I got my pilot's license.
Oh, good for you.
At the Naval Post, at the airport there.
Yeah. What got you into aviation? Did you just always want to fly, or?
Many years before, one of the men that was at the church, his wife and I became friends, and he took me for plane rides, and I always was interested in that.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what did you learn to fly on?
Oh, a little Cessna 150. It was a small plane, but it was stressed for aerobatics. And if I had a good lesson, he would teach me an aerobatic maneuver because Nick had been an old I think he was a Navy pilot, but he flew, and he knew aerobatics. And so I tumbled all over California.
Yeah.
It would go up and you'd get the aerobatic maneuver and you'd lose altitude. So you'd have to go up and down like a yo-yo.
Oh, yeah.
Doing them. And my cousin lived in the outskirts of San Francisco. So I'd go up and pick her up, and there were 2 fly-in restaurants, the Nut Tree and the Pink Lady.
Yeah.
And I'd pick her up and fly over to one of them and have lunch, and then I'd take her back.
Oh, that's so fun. I love aviation. I've been fortunate enough too to where my friends had planes and their pilot's license, and we would fly into places like go over to Hoquiam, and they had a little cafe, or fly into Yakima, or we'd hit all the grass strips. Or there's actually I don't know if did you ever fly in Washington much?
No, I haven't flown much up in here.
Yeah, there over in Copalis, there's a runway on the beach that you can land on, which is really neat. So you don't have much fear, it doesn't seem like.
I don't fear because I know where I'm going.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. That if you're a person of faith and and you a believer, then you tend to have less fear and less anxiety because you.
Well, I have rather strange ideas, so I won't go into them. But I know where I'm going.
Yeah, I like that. It seems like that's given you a lot of confidence to.
It has
to do what you want to do, and
I tell young people all the time. There was an old movie they made 2. The lady was Mame Dennis, and she raised her nephew. He wrote a book, and then they made 2 movies. The older movie was with Rosalind Russell, and in it is a line, "Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death." So I tell young people, do something now that you never thought you would ever do. If you don't like it, you can quit. But you can look back when you're my age and say, I did it.
Yeah.
And I still do things. I make jewelry. I've done ceramics. I've done all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I do scrapbooking. I make cards.
Yeah, good for you.
I sew. I do embroidery.
Yeah. There really is so much to do out there.
There is.
That's I love that saying. I have to look that
Archaeological
up.
digs.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine who's a doctor, and he became a friend. And he said he had always wanted to do it, but never did it. And I had an appointment with him, and he pulled 3 arrowheads out of his pocket.
Yeah.
He said, I did it.
Oh, good for him. Yeah, there's a dig around here for a mammoth. Yeah, that we've looked at trying to get on, but every time it pops up, we need to set a reminder this year. It's full. But yeah, it's really amazing what's out there.
There's so much to do.
Is there anything that you'd still want to do? Like, do you have anything on your bucket list you haven't checked off yet?
Well, my friend Dolly, that I've known all these years, she's a Tri-City tapper.
Yeah.
And she has me tap dancing when my back and my legs will work.
Yeah.
I've done that. There's so many things there's just all kinds of things you want to do.
Yeah. You and I are alike in that way. I think there's just so much out there I absolutely love. And it's hard to see people. I like what you said about faith and things and how life's a banquet, because I feel like a lot of kids, even my age, and I think it's especially important when you're raising children, is to really give them as many opportunities and expose them to what's out there. Because it's hard for a child to know unless you show them. I mean, that's your job as a parent, right? Is to show them. And we've tried to do a good job of that with my kids. And I'm fortunate enough where they're pretty adventurous.
Yeah, there's so much to do. If you don't like it, you can always quit. But at least you can look back and say, I did it.
Yeah.
And that's important for a child.
Yeah.
To have that.
I think probably even into all through your life, I imagine it, especially because the world evolves so much. I mean, I keep telling people like how lucky we are to sit here in a studio. Like 50 years ago, it would have been almost impossible to build a studio in your house.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And we're just so fortunate now. If you're out there looking for it, you can find a way to do something you love or want to do.
Yeah. Technology has increased so much. I have a computer. I don't call it a computer. I call it a confuser.
Yeah.
And I had a sign on the back of it that I made. modern mystery machine.
Yeah.
And the guy that was working on the computer for me one time decided he took it off because he wanted this sign.
Oh, that's funny. So going back to you got your pilot's license and you were flying up and down California, going to lunch and doing aerobatics.
Yeah.
And you said did you do anything with your pilot's license commercially, or did you do it for leisure?
No, I got up to 4 engines, but when you're fueling up a plane, it costs so much to fuel up a 4-engine plane. So I mostly stuck to the smaller planes because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And I really did it at military bases because that's even less expensive.
Yeah. And your husband, you said you and your husband traveled, or you lived all over. Was that all over the world?
Oh, yeah, I've been all over the world.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite place?
I'm not sure. When I was in Union of South Africa, one of the little girls that I knew when she was really little married a pastor in Union of South Africa, and I went to see her there. I have 2 godchildren in Kenya. I've been really blessed to be able to go and see a lot of people. I really have been. It's just been a life that I never dreamed I would ever have.
Yeah.
But I've done a lot.
Yeah.
And I continue to do it. It's not something, and the best part is to take photographs. I have a memory wall in my bedroom. Nobody else goes in there except the cat. But one of my girlfriends went in there and she grabbed a bunch of pictures off the wall. And, but really and truly, the best thing is to do something and take pictures of it, because when you get older and you look back at them, you'll say, I really did that.
Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah, I think it's amazing. We're really lucky now, even though, a lot of people my grandma especially calls my phone my button box, but I have so many photos of my kids and all these things I've done. And I even sneak pictures of my grandparents because they don't like to take pictures, but I sneak pictures of them when we're doing stuff. So I have them,
yes,
because they're very important to me. And I think that's so when you traveled the world, did you feel that did your perception change? Or, I mean, I'm sure it did, right? With all experiences, our perception changes a little bit, or we learn, but was there, I guess, did you ever have any epiphanies about when you were traveling, like in life, if that makes sense?
I really have traveled in so many places, and I've gone back to some of the places and seen the changes. And that is amazing.
Yeah.
When you go someplace and then you go back to the place and you see a change, that makes a difference. And it makes a difference in your perception of the people and also of the place itself. One of the things that I did that I really, really appreciated, one of the gentlemen that was in my husband's office when I was in D.C. area happened to be part of a fire department. And it was a half paid, half volunteer company at the time in Virginia. And he wanted me to take some slides, training slides for them. Well, when I went down there, they decided they would rather have me take pictures and go through the training to be a fireman than to stand there and say, oh, stand out in front of your house while it's burning and I'll take your picture.
Yeah.
So they made me go through fire school. And that was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
They took great delight in that because I was the only woman there at the time.
Oh, wow.
And none of the equipment fit me. But, and they'd put me on the front of the hose and they're supposed to back you up and they'd let go.
Yeah.
And the pressure would whip me around.
Yeah, go flying around.
I learned from an old fireman, take and put a coil of the hose down and sit on it, and then it doesn't do that to you.
Oh yeah, somebody was looking out for you.
Yes. But when you go through the house where, for search and rescue, and you have to go into the rooms and the hoses are connected and you learn which part is which. And they have, I won't say it on air.
Yeah.
Because there's a phrase that they use that you can tell where the hose has been laid before, because everything is pitch dark and you can't see anything.
Oh, yeah.
You have a mask on, you've got a Scott pack on, you've got, a Pompier belt,
Yeah.
all this stuff, and the boots don't fit me. And, nothing fit me. The helmet
Yeah,
would come down. If I didn't have a mask on, the helmet would have hit my nose.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
And you got how long did you do that for?
As short a time as I could. I
Yeah.
did it for about a year, about 2 years, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah. Well, they found out that I had a medical background, and then they said, well, let's send you to paramedic school. So I rode the ambulance at, they don't call it an ambulance, but I did because I was old.
Yeah.
But they would, make me ride on that too. And that was interesting. I have some experiences on that I won't share with you.
Yeah.
But that was interesting.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. So when you went through the fire academy, the whole academy then,
I went through fire school.
or fire school, how long was that? Back then, do you remember?
I don't remember, but it was quite a long time. I was going through fire school.
Yeah, I know that's not easy.
No, it's not.
My best friend is going through it right now, and he fought, and it's not easy to get into either. He went back to school, believe it or not, and I just got to give him a shout out because he's really one of the most incredible people I've ever known. He's my age, 37, and he did not need to at all. And he went back and he went to school and he would apply and apply and apply and applied. And it was years. And then all of a sudden, we kind of were like, it'll work out when it's ready.
Yeah.
And he's been, he has, a family of little boys, and he's just been working so hard to get into that. And I can't wait for him to get through his academy. We're going to
it's
go see him.
Quite a long involved. It's a lot of schooling.
Good for you.
And it's not, and a lot of it is schooling and a lot of it is practical work. And that's where the two really have a long time to get through.
Yeah. Oh, that's
not easy.
Yeah, that's impressive because he's described it to me as hell. The physical portion of it, he said, was some of the hardest things he's ever done.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And you have to be ready for whatever happens. And that's the hard part, to be ready to do whatever's necessary. I think of the guys up there in New York, and they went in without thinking about their own safety.
Just selfless.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was something that still hits people really hard. I was in New York. So this is back in 2012, and I could not go to Ground Zero. I could not bring myself to go.
No, it's when you're going in, you lose your own self-safety and try to get somebody else out. And that's not easy.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
Yeah, we're lucky there's people that are willing to do that. I think, and this time of year is really hard on them, with all the fires, wildfires and home fires. You get people screwing around. And so after you, so you've done that. If we can go back, I'm losing track of time. You've done so many things, which is so amazing. How old are you at this time when you finished?
I'm 83.
No, when you finished your fire.
Oh, I was probably in my early 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
early 30s, because you get too old to do things like that.
Yeah.
My age.
Yeah. I could probably see you still helping somebody put a fire out if you needed.
Well.
So when you, after you finished the fire department or working for the fire department, you got in a medical vehicle. And then you said these things helped you. You created you had a toolbox of all these experiences and knowledge, and you were able to travel around the world and get involved in the communities and things like that.
I've had an interesting life. I really have. And when I look back at it, there were times one time when I was much, much younger, and I was going through a very, very difficult time. And I was really in my 20s. Mid-20s, and I was ready to give up. And Dolly, my friend, came up to see me. She had been, she was in the Air Force, and she had been stationed now in the D.C. area. And she looked at me and she said something that changed my life. Marjorie, you're worth more than this.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I said, okay.
Yeah.
And I changed my life. And I've never forgotten those words. You're worth more than this.
Yeah.
When there's problems or trouble, it will end.
Yeah.
And you get through them because you are worth more than the trouble that you're going through.
Yeah, I would
always.
Agree. It's, I'm glad you bring that up, because I've talked about that with this, is that there seems to be a mental health epidemic with so many young, I'm sure a lot of generations, but I just see it more locally with my generation and the generations below me. And, we've lost people that we know to, drugs and suicide and things like that. Mm-hmm. And part of my mission was because of the generations that I'm interviewing. I wanted people to see that you're not alone. No. People go through this, and there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
And although time is so hard, it really is a beautiful thing, because you get more opportunities with time, as long as you're making the right choices and you're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you make a choice that is not the best choice at the time.
Yeah.
But you can change it.
Yeah.
And choice, you have a change. You can have a change. There's an old poem, and I can't even remember the guy that wrote it, but it says the path not taken or the road not taken. You don't have to keep going down a certain road. You can change it.
Yeah.
And go back. You can turn around and go back and start over.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes kids get embroiled and think that they have no way out. But that's why they make a turnaround, and that's why they make a reverse on a car.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. That's a great analogy. If you don't mind me asking about, you had some things that set you back with medical conditions, like you said.
Yeah.
And when you fought through those, if you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but if you don't mind, I know some people have a fear of, well, not some people, I think most people have a fear of going through surgeries and running into medical conditions. Did you have a mindset or did you have like a mechanism that you thought to get you through some of those processes, or how did you stay so, vibrant and active and involved?
Well, there's not much of me left. And starting when I was very young, I had rheumatic fever, and during second grade, and my teacher was great. She used to bring the work in the hospital. And so I spent more time in the hospital doing second grade than I did in class. And I've had, well, you want me to go through it?
Yeah, okay. Whatever.
Well, I've had 3 major heart attacks, 3 myocardial infarcts. And I've started out at 18 years old. I had ulcers from stress. I had 18 inches of my colon removed. I remember it because I was 18 and 18 inches.
Yeah.
I was 23 when they took out almost all of my stomach from ulcers. I've had cancer. My mother died of ovarian cancer, and they found it in me. I've had 3 myocardial infarcts, which are heart attacks. I went to sleep one time thinking that I wasn't going to have a foot. And I was very fortunate. I have a mechanical ankle in my right leg, my right ankle. I have a pin in my femur from my left knee to my hip. I have an L4, L5 fusion in my back and another vertebrae that was in pieces. And I was told I'd never walk again.
Yeah.
And it was glued together by a doctor here locally. And I have recommended him to so many people because he glued the pieces back together.
Yeah.
And I walk. I also tap dance.
Yeah.
It's something I never thought I'd ever do.
So you do tap dancing right now with the?
I haven't done it for a while because I've been having a little bit of issue with my back and also my eyes.
Yeah.
I've had cataracts removed, and the cat that I have now swiped her tail across my left eye, and it caused an ulcer.
Oh no.
And so it has scarred, and I'm waiting to have that reduced in size, and I'll have to wear another lens.
Yeah.
But they did the cataract surgery in my right eye, and my reaction was, oh my goodness, I can now see my wrinkles. And in dust I could ignore before, now I can't do that.
Yeah.
But it's one thing after another.
Yeah.
As you get older, things happen. I'm very fortunate because at one point I was working with the venomous snakes, and you build up an anti-venom. You have to do that so that it won't hurt you as much if you do get bitten. I think they're making some drugs now using some part of the anti-venom from snakes, and I have no rheumatoid arthritis. And both sides of my family had it.
Oh, wow.
So I don't have rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, I don't know the process or anything, and I don't recommend that you get bitten by a snake to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think some of the drugs that they're using for rheumatoid arthritis they have parts of chemicals that come from venom.
It's wild it's wild what they're doing with, in pharmaceuticals and the things that they're getting from animals.
Yeah,
I think we were talking about, Hallie was talking to me about how Ozempic is actually using an enzyme out of what is the animal?
Gila monster.
The Gila monster?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not that I think that's, Ozempic has its downfalls too, but it's just, it's incredible what people do.
When I worked at the place where they were extracting venom from snakes, they started me on one of the programs there. What they do is they start you out titers, what they call titers, and they're very low titers. And it's just the dilution.
Uh-huh.
And I got up to the third dilution, and somebody said, oh, she's young. We don't know what happened with her. So they stopped it. But they used the venom injections, very much diluted, to create antibodies in your own body.
Mm-hmm.
And then they take your blood, and if somebody is bitten, they can make an anti-venom and give it to somebody.
Oh, wow.
They also use horses and do the same thing with them.
Oh, wow.
But some people are allergic to horses, so they have to use people.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is something. That's one of my biggest fears, getting bit by a poisonous snake out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah. You really need to watch where you're walking.
Oh, yeah.
Especially around here, there's a rattlesnake mountain.
Oh, yeah. It's named that for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something.
Well, there's another reason.
Oh. Well, so I'm curious about when you were going through these surgeries and things, did you have something that kept you busy where you were a little immobile? Like you said, you sew and you do jewelry.
Yeah, I make jewelry. I learned to do ceramics. I learned to use a wheel for pottery. I learned to paint. I learned to do scrapbooking. I learned to do, there's so many hobbies you can have.
Yeah.
Dolly keeps telling me I have far too many, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's only certain times you should listen to Dolly, maybe. Like,
Well,
like when no,
I mean, Dolly and I have we enjoy each other's company.
oh, she's great.
She's fantastic.
An amazing person. I was so thankful to sit down here and visit with her too.
You know, everything that happens with my eyes when I couldn't see, I go to church, and I'm really quiet in church, believe it or not.
Yeah.
As much as I've been talking today, but I am. But the people gave me rides, and if I hadn't had the eye problem, and where they were driving me here and there and everywhere, I never would have gotten to know them as well.
Yeah.
So every problem,
Yes.
you look for the best what happens
Yes.
out of it. One of the girls called me today, and I said, I would never have gotten to know you if I hadn't needed you for a ride.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how that works out? I mean, I've only known you for a short period of time, but you and I think very alike, I would think. Because I even tell that to like my kids is like, you learn the most in the hardest times. And even
Absolutely.
that even happens with even if it's at work or even if it's out in, I would say in society, you just learn so much. And I can say that I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of traveling and visited with a lot of people. And with what comes with that, with traveling is, we've done it recently where you get laid over. Like we were coming back from Florida a few months ago, believe it or not, and there was a cat loose on the plane and we were already late leaving. Well, we missed our connecting flight in Minneapolis to get back home to Seattle. Mm-hmm. So we were going to be late overnight in Minneapolis. Well, it couldn't have been how it was a few days before. I had my daughter and her best friend, and I was like, I want to take you guys to the Mall of America someday. Well, we just happened to get laid over in Minneapolis. So we ran over to the Mall of America. And I know it's not the same as what you're talking about, but it's those things where even in times where your plans get changed or something like that, you can find the beauty in it if you're open to it. And man, we went to the Mall of America with an hour left and we bought them the all you can ride passes. And there was maybe 10 other people. And those girls just ran through the roller coasters and they had the time of their life. Yeah. And I think it's important to find the beauty in times where your plans maybe get changed or.
Yeah. There's no rainbows if there's not any rain.
That's right. Yeah. I think it's fun too. Cause you talk about how like the butterfly effect is, so I have my youngest daughter full time and my mom comes and helps me during the week with my daughter and she lives a couple hours away. And while my mom's very talented, but where she lives, there's nothing for her to do. And my mom can sing, she can paint, she can do all these amazing things. And how we got Dolly on here was because my mom has always wanted to tap dance. And so she found the Tri-City Tappers and then she recommended Dolly and then Dolly recommended to have you here. So it's just,
I don't know. That's a good thing.
No, it is. It is. Trust me. I already, I've enjoyed it so much just communicating with you in the last week or so. And just, we're really thankful to have you here and telling us everything.
I would suggest if you're going to do something, take pictures.
Yeah.
Take pictures because when you get back to be my age, you really can look back at those pictures.
Yeah.
And it brings back so many memories that you probably would have just put aside or not thought about.
Yeah.
And if you have a picture of it, then you can look back and say, oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, that's why I'm so thankful you brought pictures because we'll be able to, we'll put them up for people to see all these things because, it's one thing to have people tell you the story and then, their imagination can paint the picture. But I just from what I've seen so far, I don't want to spoil it, but looking at them, I wanted to be able to sit down and spend more time looking at them because they are really special.
Well, I don't even know what they are. What my friend was going through the pictures and pulled out some of them. I have books of pictures that I make scrapbooks of. I really do. I love the idea of making scrapbooks.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's going to ever look at them except me, but that's all right. enjoy making them.
Well, I think hopefully a lot of people see these pictures when we put them on this episode. So it really is amazing. I think if you look back on everything you've done, is there something that stands out to you that you're really proud of? Like, is there just one? I'm sure there's many things, but is there one that sticks out to you?
Oh my, picking one thing, I don't know. Probably the fact that the kids that I knew back many, many years ago say that they have gotten back in touch with me.
Yeah.
And are keeping in touch with me.
Yeah.
Really makes a difference because I'd never expected that.
Yeah.
And when they first got in touch with me,
Yeah.
it made a difference to me.
I think that's something that comes with, I think, with my generation, with age, because I did something like I've done that recently in the last few years where I reconnected with my step grandma after 25 years. And because she was that part of my family had passed away. And it's one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me to reconnect with her. And she's 95 and we're going to try and get her on here. She's lived an amazing life as well. I think what happens is when, I don't know how old these kids are that you're talking about, but you start to, your parents pass or your friends' parents do or something like that. And you start to do a lot of reflection. At least this was for me. And I went back, to my high school girlfriend's grandparents and I made sure that they knew how thankful I was. And I told them how, thank you for everything you did for me when I was a kid. And they looked at me and they said, well, we had fun too, but I wonder if that's what's happening. If people are just starting to really appreciate, everything you've done. And isn't it amazing to think about how impactful you can be to somebody in a positive way?
And at the time, you don't even know that you're doing it.
Yeah.
That's the incredible part of it. You don't know what you might have said or what you might have done.
Yeah.
And years later, that person comes back and tells you that it changed them.
Yeah.
It really makes a difference. Dolly did something that was really funny. She went to one of
can you take a picture? Sorry.
One of the class reunions, and she brought back some pictures. And I looked at them and I said, "Those are old people."
Yeah.
I didn't even recognize them because they looked old.
Yeah.
And it was such an amazing thing to me to think that I'm that age.
Yeah.
I don't think of myself as being old.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I keep going and doing things.
Yeah. It's probably a blessing.
Yeah. Well, there's not much of me left.
Yeah.
I have a lot of parts that have either been, that used to be the 3 R's were reading, writing, and arithmetic. Mine are repair, replace, or remove.
Yeah. Well, as long as they keep your brain in there and your heart, you'll be doing great.
Those things are still, the heart might not be working as good as it could, but the brain sometimes, and I'm not sure whether it ever worked that good. It does seem to keep going.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think it's excellent. I know it's incredible to hear about somebody who's done so many things.
Oh,
we look back. I think that's kind of I wonder if that's something that like technology, if people are like living vicariously through people now instead of actually going out and doing things, where like your generation to really experience things or to know about it, people weren't just exchanging pictures, to each other's hands. Where are we at? 43. Yeah. We'll probably have to shut this one down, but once again, I just really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing everything. And you're a joy to have on. I really enjoyed it.
Well, it's fun. It's fun for me to be able to talk about something else other than myself, really. Yeah. Some of the places I've been, some of the animals, stories, things that I've been part of.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
But I don't, I think anybody really has stories. That's not just me.
Well, they're pretty, it's neat. What I've been learning is nobody's story is the same. That's kind of the best part. Nobody's story is the same. I think that's just, we talk about that, how if you live long enough, you're really just a walking library.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the best part. Yeah, it's why we do what we do. But yeah, I just want to thank you, and I hope we get to do it again.
Oh, I can go on and on.
All right.
And on. And Dolly keeps telling me, Marjorie, and you.
Yeah, you just tell me when, and we can do it again.
Oh,
if you come up with stuff,
anytime.
other things you want to talk about.
Anytime. It's fun.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I
Of course.
appreciate it. I didn't expect it at all.
Yeah, that's the best things, unexpected.